Hello, everybody! On behalf of the Highland Park Public Library, we'd like to welcome you to Library in Your Living Room. We are pleased to present Shelf Isolation, a weekly miniseries about books, culture, and what to read next. I'm Sarah Marie, and this is your Information and Reader Services Department. In this episode, we are excited to share with you what we have been reading, watching, and or listening to during self-isolation. To begin our mini-series, I'm going to turn things over to Lisa.
Thanks, Sarah Marie. This week, I have been reading the Best of Uncanny magazine. This is a collection of short stories published in Uncanny magazine, which is a science fiction and fantasy literary magazine. And sometimes it's just nice to read shorter sci-fi and fantasy stories if you want something quick. There's some really, really great ones in here by Gaiman, who I, as it turns out, really liked. I really liked the little comic I read 2 weeks ago. So that's been fun. And then I think it's Sean McGuire. It's Seanan McGuire, who's also really, really great. And just, it's thick, but because the stories are so short, it doesn't feel like a big, long book, and that can be nice to read off and on during the day if you've got little tasks that are going to interrupt you. And with that, I am going to pass it on to Michelle.
Thanks, Lisa. So this week I started by reading a cozy mystery. The title is The Secret Book and Scone Society. It's by Ellery Adams. It is a first in a series. So it takes place in a small town called Miracle Springs. It's in North Carolina, and it is a place for healing. They have a natural hot springs there, and they have great food, and they have great spas, and people go there to kind of cure their ills. And if that doesn't work, they go to the gingerbread house bakery where they get a comfort scone. And after that, they go to Miracle Books where they talk to the bookseller named Nora, and she will carefully choose a book that will help them. So a businessman from out of town came in and started talking to Nora kind of for guidance. But after going to the gingerbread house bakery and somewhere along the way, he was found dead. So a group of 4 women form the Secret Book and Scone Society, and they get together and they try to solve the mystery of the businessman. I thought it was very good. It had lots of character development, lots of characters, and it's the first in a series. So that one's really great. Next, I started my second re-listen of Sing Unburied Sing by Jesmyn Ward. It's one of my favorites. I'm not done quite yet, so hopefully next time I could tell you about it. It's fantastic. Last but not least, I of course started a new show, which of course is on Animal Planet because I love Animal Planet. It is called Saved by the Barn. It is about a barn sanctuary in Michigan where they rescue and rehabilitate farm animals that have been abused, neglected. They just require a lot of medical care and they live their life there. It's really great. It actually is on Saturdays. It's right after the zoo, which of course I've talked lots about. So you could watch the zoo and then you could watch Saved by the Barn. And with that, I'm going to pass it on to Catherine.
Thank you, Michelle. The first book I finished this week is called Clyde Fans by Seth, just one name, Seth. This is a graphic novel that was actually written over a period of 20 years. It's about 2 brothers whose family business was fans, Clyde Fans, named for their father who started the business. The artwork of the novel really focuses on different views of interiors and exteriors of the vintage storefront and upstairs apartment that their father purchased and which the family, including one of the brothers, lived in. And I thought back to having heard English teachers tell me that whenever a book focuses a lot on describing architecture, that you should pay attention to that because it's usually symbolic. And I think that it's very true in this case. This is a story that's really about aging and isolation, but even though it's kind of a quiet and sad story, I really liked reading it and it was pretty cool looking too. The other book that I finished that I'm going to talk about is New Waves by Kevin Nguyen. And this is a novel about 2 friends who work for a social media startup in New York. They're both a bit disgruntled about not fitting into the startup culture that is mostly dominated by young white men. And then one night, without much planning, they decide to get back at their employer by stealing something. And I've seen this book listed as a thriller. I've seen it listed as a satire. I did not think it was either of those things, but I did enjoy it just as a novel. But it also made me think of another book that I finished a few months ago, which I'll mention, which is called Uncanny Valley by Wiener. This is not a novel, it's a memoir about the author's experiences working for various startups. She really kind of dishes the dirt, and she caused a lot of stir as readers tried to guess the names of the companies that she worked for, because she describes them but does not give the names. So that was fun, and it was definitely an interesting look into the tech world from the viewpoint of a young woman who worked in it. And with that, I will pass it to Stephanie.
Thank you, Catherine. Well, this week I finally finished the first book, Eeny, Meeny by M.J. Arlidge. And I will say it was really suspenseful, very exciting. It's a police thriller with Helen Grace, the detective, and she is trying to solve a string of serial killings that happen with people in pairs. And so no one seems to be linked, but then slowly they start to piece it together, and all these people have a link back to Helen Grace. And the interesting thing about it is the person that's a serial killer has been identified as a woman. And she takes the pairs, puts them in a very remote place, like the first people. I'm not going to give the story away, but anyway, she puts them in a swimming pool, really deep where they can't get out. There's not a ladder or anything. And she basically gives them a gun with one bullet and tells them that, you have to decide who's going to kill whom. And of course, everyone at the beginning, they're not going to do that. But as the weeks pass, they're starving because there's no food and things, and they're kind of losing their mind and stuff. It ends up that somebody comes out and somebody doesn't. And so it was really, really good. The ending was unbelievable. I will say that it was my favorite out of the three. I guess I should have read it first since it was the first book. But hey, I'd like to do things backwards, it seems. So I highly recommend Eeny, Meeny by M.J. Arlidge. And again, it's the detective series for Helen Grace. The other one I did was The Collector's Apprentice by B.A. Shapiro. And anyway, it was a really good book. It's set in the 1920s between Paris and Philadelphia. And it's about a young 19-year-old girl who falls in love with the wrong man, who ends up being a swindler. And she finds herself in Paris completely broke and has like a rooming house where she finds a place to stay and some friends and things. But in the meantime, she meets this American who has decided he's going to set up a museum in Philadelphia. And so he is buying pieces of art, and she becomes his translator. And she thinks that the job is going to end then. But in the meantime, all these twists are happening. It goes between 1929 back to 1922, back and forth, and it kind of tells the story of different people. It's very, very good. It has a really good ending. I won't say that it's happy. I won't say it's sad, but it has a satisfying ending. And with that, I will turn it over to Karen.
Thanks, Stephanie. This week, I started to read something on paper again. I think I missed that for some reason, doing a lot of e-reading. But part of the reason I did was the fact I could get some actual physical books again through libraries, curbside pickup programs. So I ended up with the second in the series I began maybe a few weeks ago by Andrea Camilleri about Inspector Montalbano. And this one's called The Terracotta Dog. And I think I mentioned I had a little trouble keeping the Italian names straight, of the characters, and a lot of things were kind of foreign to me. Well, at the end of the book, the first book and the second book, there is a handy notes section. And although there are no little footnotes in the text itself, if you know this is there, you can look up things and it'll tell you what page number a certain phrase was mentioned. Like, for example, a man of honor was a phrase that was used. And that is an epithet that stands for mafioso. Well, I wouldn't have known, so this will be nice and helpful. So anyway, that's going well. I've just begun. I don't really know. It's got the same style as the other book. The inspector is very principled, honest, likes to do things that are right, not just to make trouble. And he gets into some interesting situations and amusing too. So pretty light. And then to alternate with that, I'm still reading Breath on my Kindle, Breath by James Nestor. It's interesting, the author is very adventurous in experimenting on himself. He's looking into the science of breath and how it should be done, and why our skulls evolved the way they have evolved, and was it the way we breathed? Was it the things we ate? So he's looking into a lot of historical things and doing a lot of testing on himself, and it's really interesting, but it gets a little technical sometimes. And I think I might rather have the paper book to flip through rather than just have a page at a time and not know how long he'll be talking about a certain thing. So that's just one of the disadvantages for me with a digital version. I don't get the whole picture. I don't even know how many pages are in this. So anyway, it's good though. I'm liking both of these. So next we will hear from William.
Thank you, Karen. This week, in addition to finishing up Elantris, I've dipped into my backlog of games for this awkward part of the calendar year where there are no major must-play games released. The first game I'll talk about is Xenoblade Chronicles Definitive Edition for the Nintendo Switch. Now, here's the game with a fascinating background. It was developed by Monolith Studios, which consists of a group of developers who worked at Square Enix, the company that makes Final Fantasy, in an effort to continue a series that they worked on, the cult classic called Xenogears. When they formed, they went on to make the Xenosaga series for the PlayStation 2, which was supposed to be a 6-game series that got shortened to 3. The aforementioned Xenoblade Chronicles for the Nintendo Wii, which got a 5-year anniversary re-release for the 3DS, which we have at the library. Xenoblade Chronicle X for the Wii U. Xenoblade Chronicle 2 for the Switch, also available at the library. And Xenoblade Chronicle 2 Torna, the Golden Country, also for the Switch. Beyond being very dedicated to the Xeno prefix, the one thing Monolith does extremely well is represent scale. So in this game, you play Shulk, this member of a humanoid race who resides on the corpse of an ancient being stuck in mid-fight with an equally huge robotic being who is stuck mid-rend of this person. Each and every area of the game is designed to show you how large this thing is in terms of how you can just keep going while barely moving between. Closest analog I can give to that within recent gaming would be The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild and how open that area they made Hyrule look, which makes sense because Monolith was actually brought in by Nintendo to work on that particular part of the game because it is something they're that well known for. Now, I'll warn you, if you do decide to pick this up, you have to be kind of comfortable with both anime tropes, good and bad, and hearing the word Monado multiple times, which is the not looking sword-like sword that is the main plot point of the game. Also, if you burned out of like MMORPGs in the late 90s, early aughts, maybe this won't be for you because this really does play like that sort of game without you having to worry about setting up a raid date with a bunch of your friends. Still, great time if you're into all those other things. The other game I just recently picked back up is Control, which we have at the library here for the PS4 and Xbox One. I describe this one as Warehouse 13 by way of the X-Files. You play Jessie Faden, a young woman who tends to talk to herself quite a bit, who is looking to find her missing brother and ends up at a very nondescript government building housing the Federal Bureau of Control that specializes in the collection and research of paranatural items. Unfortunately for her, things have gone very wrong, and now she'll have to fight her way through a series of twisted mementos and possessed office workers. Like Warehouse 13, Control will have you interacting with items with souped up abilities. Sometimes the logic is fairly straightforward. You have the merry-go-round that moves really fast. Sometimes it's just weird, like a giant ship anchor that vomits antique clocks. Meanwhile, the office research labs and the subway that's located in this place have notes, sound recordings, and very well done full motion videos that give you a sense of what it was like to be at this very extraordinary place while dealing with traditional office culture. Like there are so many of these posters that remind me of the PSA ads that are in our offices about malware and avoiding giving up your password, but instead warning our employees, don't bring name brand things here because they could get haunted. If you're looking for something to get lost in, Control is definitely it. And with that, I will pass it on to Jackie.
Thank you, William. So today I'm going to talk about a book that Karen actually mentioned a couple weeks ago called Hidden Valley Road by Robert Coker. It's about a family, Don and Mimi Galvin, who had 12 children, 10 boys, 2 girls. 6 of the boys developed schizophrenia. So it was devastating for the family to have these boys develop this. And there's a lot of discussion with the psychoanalyst and the geneticist between the nature versus nurture. And at the time, nurture was actually winning the war. So it was not good for Mimi. But this book discusses the devastation for the family, how the family stayed together, which was kind of amazing. And the author was amazed in an interview he had with Rolling Stones. He talked about how unusual it was for a family to stay together because it does ruin the family dynamic, having something with such a devastation. And he said there is no common denominator among the children about how schizophrenia affected them. But the common denominator is that they become strangers to their own motivation. You're a stranger to yourself, that your mind is telling you to do things that you can't really understand. So it's a very interesting book. I downloaded it from Libby. It's available in ebook and the audiobook there, and also at the library. The second book I read, I happened to see it sitting on the shelf, was An American Summer by Alex Horowitz. And he is the one who wrote There Are No Children Here. This book talks about the effect of violence in Chicago and the communities that have had. He mentioned in his introduction that for 20 years, from 1990 to 2010, 14,033 people were killed by guns and another 60,000 injured. So he asked the question, what did that do to the spirit of individuals and communities? He's primarily focusing on the communities, neighborhoods that are in the South and Southwest Chicago, and they're African American, Latina, poor neighborhoods. It's a very interesting book. He uses the summer of 2013 to frame his story, and he interviews mothers who had children that were killed, people who were victims of violence and then perpetrate additional violence, family and friends, social workers. It's all a very interesting book. And if you are waiting for some of the anti-racist books, I know a lot of our anti-racist books have hold lists on them. You may want to try something like An American Summer, or There Are No Children Here, or Matthew Jesmyn's Evicted, to read some of the issues that may be involved with some of these neighborhoods. The poverty, the lack of education and jobs. It's a very interesting thing. So American Summer is available on the Libby app, and it's also available at the library. The last book I'm reading is a sequel to The Roji Project, The Roji Effect. I needed to read something very light-hearted, and this is it. It's very humorous. If you read The Roji Project, or if you remember that, it's about Don Tillman, who's a genetic professor, who decides he wants to get married and have a wife, and he meets Roji, who meets none of his criteria. So the Roji Effect picks up after they've been married 10 months and 10 days, and Roji announced that we're pregnant. So it's a continuing story, and it's very humorous, and it's very lighthearted. And the nice thing about both the Roji Effect and the Roji Project is it's narrated by Don. So you don't usually have the male aspect for it. The last thing I want to talk about is my favorite time of the year. I watch a bear cam that's on explore.com. And it takes place in Brooks Falls, Alaska, which is in the Katmai National Park. And it's just a live webcam that shows brown bears in their natural habitat. Very interesting. I love watching nature, and this is one way of doing it. And it just went live the other day. It's available 24/7. I absolutely love it. But if you're not interested in bears and you may like something else, Explorer has something like 140 live cams around the world. All different kinds of animals, you name it, you like it. I liked watching the Decorah eagles. Those are interesting. There's a puffin, had a puffin egg that hatched the other day. So it's always very interesting. You can almost any animal you like. And if you're not into animals and you just want someplace zen, they have some real cool zen cameras. There's some kelp farms. There's surfing in Alaska. There's sunsets. So you can find almost anything you'd like to watch. So that's a good stuff, like to kind of de-stress yourself. So that's all I have for today. I'm going to turn it over to Sarah.
Thanks, Jackie. I will start off with a recommendation from my 20-month-old. This is Harry the Dirty Dog. We keep a basket of books next to his crib, and before naps and bedtime, I always pick up 2 books, hold them up, let him choose which one. Recently, he's been picking this every single time, and if I don't give this to him as one of the options, he points at the basket and says, dog, dog. So this is definitely a hit right now. It's a classic. I just checked. It was published in 1956. I had a copy of it when I was a kid. My grandparents had a dog that they named Harry that looked a lot like this. So I love this book. But very cute story. But I also wanted to recommend a YouTube channel called Storyline Online, which is celebrities reading children's books. And then the children's books are like gently animated. And this is read by Betty White, and it is wonderful. So besides reading lots and lots of picture books and board books, everything I've read this week has been a romance novel. So first, I finished Pride and Prejudice and Other Flavors, which I know Sarah Marie has mentioned several times, so I don't need to do a lot of description, but it's a retelling of Pride and Prejudice in an Indian American family in contemporary California. The main character, Trisha, is a doctor, and DJ, also named Darcy, is a chef. So there are a lot of great descriptions of Indian food, and it made me very hungry. And there's a second book in the series, just came out last month, called A Recipe for Persuasion, that I will probably be talking about next week. And then I finished reading Jesmyn Guillory's Wedding Date series. I had talked before about the first 2 books in the series, The Wedding Date and The Proposal. So this week I read the last 3. So first was The Wedding Party, which is about Maddie and Theo. They're both best friends of Alexa from The Wedding Date, and they do not like each other, and they both get asked to be in her bridal party. He thinks she's shallow, she thinks he's pretentious, but after she drives him home after the engagement party, they end up hooking up, and then they keep hooking up and eventually develop feelings for each other. That one was really cute, definitely a romantic comedy, a lot of fun, quick read. The next one in the series is Royal Holiday, and this one was about Maddie's mother, Vivian. She goes along with her daughter when she has to go be a stylist to the Duchess, seems to be basically the Duchess of Cambridge. So it's at Sandringham Estate in England at Christmas time, and she meets the Queen's private secretary, Malcolm, and they have a cute Christmas time romance, lots of scones, lots of drinking tea in front of the fire. Very cute. I love Christmas romance, especially in the summer, because I can pretend it's not hot outside. And finally, the last book in the series just came out yesterday. I was able to get an advanced reader copy, digital advanced reader copy, so I finished it yesterday, called Party of Two, and is about Olivia, who's the older sister of Alexa from The Wedding Date. And she has moved to California to start her own law firm with a friend. She meets a handsome man at a hotel bar and finds out that he is a United States senator. He really likes her and keeps sending her cakes. So they start dating. And it's a lot about, like, she's trying to decide if she wants to be in a serious relationship, knowing how much of her life will be public because he is a senator. That one was also really cute. A lot more food. All of these books, they eat a lot of food and make me very hungry. So I loved the whole series. They were very light and funny. And I especially like the characters are all in their 30s and established in their careers, and really like respect each other's careers as part of their romance. So that's my books for the week, and I will pass it on to Sarah Marie.
Thank you, Sarah. So I don't know if you can tell, but my hair is possibly almost the longest it's ever been because I have not gotten my hair cut during COVID. So to kind of mirror that, I read a book that's been on my to-read list for quite a while. It's called Me, My Hair, and I, 27 Women Untangle an Obsession, edited by Elizabeth Benedict. The editor, Benedict, kind of sets the stage for the rest of the essays with a thought piece about how for women, hair is an entire library of information that can tell others about everything from self-image to cultural values, interpersonal relationships, and so forth and so on. Going through the essays was really interesting because they resonated so much with me and my own lived experience and that of my friends. So in a very big way, it felt like I was being included in a conversation with these women on a topic with a window into their lives and experiences, especially as these conversations are very familiar to me. So I do recommend the book, especially if you need a palate cleanser, though there are essays that hit particularly hard. It's not a light palate cleanser, but it is a good one. Next, I wanted to acknowledge Pride Month. I tend to read a lot of LGBTQA plus fiction, mostly because those stories have a lot of found family within them, as well as some pretty interesting takes on genre fiction when these novels are outside the typical fiction literature box. So I'm going to talk about Patrick Ness's 2017 novel, Release. It is a teen YA novel, as are most of Ness's novels. Ness, his works delve into issues of humanity, along the lines of racism, gender bias, oppression, and resistance, especially in his dystopian series. So, about Release. Release follows our main character, Adam Thorne, through what is possibly the worst day of his life, or is explicitly the worst day of his life up to date. Within the opening portions of one day, Adam goes for a run, has to deal with his ex, has a confrontation with his evangelical pastor of a father, details a scene with a creepy boss who has been sexually harassing him, and meets with his best friend, Angela, who Adam very much relies on, and who announces to him that she is moving to the Netherlands for senior year. There's another storyline within this book about the ghost of a classmate murdered by her boyfriend, but it all, again, happens within the span of one day. Patrick Ness has an amazing capacity to write narrative threads that are as moving as they are exploratory in terms of delving into emotions in such a poignant and speaking ways that make his books really give pause and ask readers to reflect. There is also an endnote in this novel that acknowledges Virginia Woolf's Mrs. Dalloway and Judy Blume's Forever as key influences, and I definitely encourage anybody interested in this novel to read the endnote either before or after, because it really serves to continue and enhance that experience and those narratives. I also really quickly wanted to plug a newer TV show, which is also kind of a book and movie plug-in-one. If any of you have ever read Becky Appertall's Simon vs. the Homo Sapiens Agenda or seen the subsequent 2018 film Love, Simon, I wanted to recommend a new Hulu show called Love, Victor, which is set in the same narrative universe as the others. Victor is a new student at the high school in Simon's universe, and Victor, is also on his own journey of self-discovery with challenges at home, challenges adjusting to a new city, and struggling with his sexual orientation as well. There are high emotional stakes in all the content, but it is a truly rewarding and honestly a great mood cleanser. And now on to Nancy.
Thank you, Sarah Marie. I am going to share my screen once again. So Ravinia, as you know, closed for several years during the Depression, and they came back in 1936. And someone put together, and it's in our collections, handily, a guide of everything the orchestra played from 36 to 54. Very handy. So while checking the pages and everything, we found some interesting composers, some mostly well-known, mostly standard, but someone who caught my eye, if I can zoom in here, is William Still. I'm gonna highlight it there. And Still was a Harlem Renaissance composer who was really one of the first people, one of the first American composers, very early classical American composer, to take European style and mesh it with American spiritual music. Dvorak did it, but it was the opposite. And his music is really very interesting and beautiful, and is being played more. In fact, in our collections, we have a recording by some of his works by Rachel Barton Pine. We have his symphonies. And he used both traditional orchestrations and homemade instruments that would have been used, or simple instruments like the banjo. So some of his music is also streaming on Alexander. So if you have a chance, we have quite a few selections of the library by Still on CD. And it's an interesting combination, and he's really a great composer, which I'm glad to see more people are recording and sharing. The symphony played in the 30s. He wrote the piece in 1930. So Chicago Symphony, although they played at Ravinia as early as 1905, 1906, Ravinia became their official home when they opened in 1936. So I will hand this back to Lori. Thank you.
Thanks, Nancy. This past few weeks, I read one book. I read it by David Koepp. That's how you pronounce his name. It's called Cold Storage. David Koepp it's his first novel, but he's a screenwriter. He's written the screenplay for Jurassic Park and Spider-Man, Panic Room, and War of the Worlds. So it's a scientific thriller. It starts in the late 80s where a couple of special agents from some ultra secret government agency are sent to Australia to try to keep a strange mutated fungus from spreading. And then, of course, it goes forward to more or less current times where they've brought a tiny portion of this fungus, which has been hidden, tucked away in a natural storage area, ultra secret natural storage area that of course has been decommissioned and has become a storage facility for people who save all their stuff. So of course it has mutated and starts spreading again. I really enjoyed this book. It kind of reminded me of Michael Crichton's Andromeda Strain. The characters were, I felt, very believable, people who are just thrown into these very bizarre situations and rise to the occasion. And I enjoyed it and I highly recommend it. It is something I don't usually read. Also, if you are watching this and you live in Highland Park and you would like a copy, I have 6 brand new copies of it sitting under my desk. So for the first 6 people who send an email to me at hppla@hplibrary.org, I will send you back an email and I will put a copy in our grab and go area for you if you'd like. And that's like a little prize for watching this episode all the way to the end. But you have to live in Highland Park, Illinois. We're not mailing it to anyone. And that's all I have to say. Thanks for listening.
That is it for us today, folks. As always, please remember that we are all here for you. We are available for any comments, questions, or concerns you may have, and you can reach us online through Facebook at facebook.com/hplibrary, through our Twitter, which is @hplibrary, or via email, which is hppla@hplibrary.org. You can find this information online through our website, which is hplibrary.org. Our music today was Carefree by Kevin MacLeod. You can find more information about this and the titles we mentioned in our show notes below. Okay, everybody, this is us signing off until we see you next. Stay safe.